welcome to the second part of the special series of GRI Club presents India, an emerging global real estate investment destination. A unique business networking platform gathering the world's leading real estate investors, developers and lenders to build relationships and strengthen their global network. We spoke to the chairman of GRI Club, Henry Alster, to gain more insights into the club's overarching mission. Now, Henry, the GRI Club is an international industry body meant for seasoned real estate professionals. What is it designed to achieve?
The GRI is a club. It's a club of a very small group of people. The aim of the GRI is to create a global community of people that relate to each other, that are connected with each other, that feel comfortable, even across borders, picking up the phone and discussing opportunities together. And the reason for all that is that the real estate industry is a very fragmented industry. People go from project to project, from investment to investment. And for each of these investments, they need to put together a coalition of architects, builders, lenders, investors, a whole group of people to undertake this investment together. And therefore, knowing who the right people are, what the right people are for any specific situation, is very worthwhile information.
Developers in the real estate sector are beginning to take an increased interest in warehousing spaces. We spoke to the founder and CEO of One Industrial Spaces, Anshul Singhal, to understand the drivers behind this demand. Warehousing is typically one of the most overlooked sectors within the logistics space. But now they are insulated, ventilated, they're climate-proof, they've got round-the-clock surveillance. How do you explain this sudden surge in demand?
So, warehousing demand typically globally is driven by consumption. So if you see the first few cities where warehousing took off as proper warehousing, originally we used to have godowns, places where people would just store stuff. They used to be dimly lit, not safe for human working environment.
Right.
And of late what's happened is that because the consumption has gone up drastically over the years, India has, and e-commerce is coming in, the customer behavior has changed. So what used to happen typically about 5-6 years ago, if you wanted to buy a phone or a hairbrush, for example, you would go to your kirana store or your nearby mall, small mall.
Sure.
And if your guy tells you kal aayega, you'd wait for a day or two. Today, you go on Amazon, click, 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 and it shows up at home. If you now go to your kirana store and he tells you, I don't have it in stock, you probably won't go back there again.
I wouldn't.
Yeah. So what this is changing, the whole e-commerce click mentality has changed buying behavior in customers. Now this buying behavior is not only online, but it's also offline. So stores, retailers and fulfillment guys like Amazon, Flipkarts are more pressured to have a delivery period which is extremely short. Now because of that, you have limited shelf space. You can't store everything in your shop. So you need to have a back-end warehousing base near the large consumption centers where the minute your stock runs out, you can refill it in a very layman's terms. So that's buying behavior along with the consumption rise is one of the key drivers for warehousing growth in India.
Well, how much of this demand would you attribute to policy reform and financial reform, be it the Make in India movement, goods and service tax, so on and so forth?
Well, a lot of it actually. So Make in India has always been a pusher for consumption, manufacturing activity. Manufacturing activity always leads to stock creation, which requires warehousing space. GST has been a pretty major driver because effectively what's happened with GST is if you needed to originally have in Maharashtra and Gujarat 2 godowns or warehouses, now you don't need that. You would position it more geographically to suit both markets. So effectively you can now build a larger warehouse, a better quality warehouse, with all the bells and whistles, rather than just fulfilling tax requirements of both states and doing stock transfers. So that's the reason for GST and government policies pushing up warehousing demand.
A real estate conglomerate that's gravitating towards the warehousing and logistics sector with increased momentum is the Hiranandani Group. We spoke with its director, Sridhar N., to understand the guiding principles behind the group's new Green Base initiative.
So tell us about the Hiranandani's group decision to launch Green Base. Our understanding is that it's a dedicated platform and profit center focused purely on industrial warehouses and facilities.
Pooja, to begin with, I think we started this initiative of Hiranandani's to enter into industrial and logistics a year back under the brand name Green Base, the vertical under which we are setting up the platform for developing industrial and logistics parks. It's a pan-India initiative, and we are looking at developing close to about 500 acres of land and about 12 million square feet in the next 5 to 7 years. Now, it makes, given the structural reforms, the rollout of GST that has happened, and a lot of work on the road infrastructure and freight corridors, etc., and the Make in India movement, as per our Honorable Prime Minister, has taken as an initiative in the last few years, and all of this has given a good environment for this sector to really flourish, number one. Number two, I think there is a substantial amount of demand which is coming in for a grade A industrial and logistics assets, which is really going to go a long way in reducing the cost and optimize supply chain efficiency for the customers. And given our strength as a developer, unlike a typical fund, we are looking at the customer-centric approach and developing an operationally sustainable business model for this vertical. And we thought, given our expertise and brand name and township infrastructure expertise that we have over time, this was just a very natural progression for us to be in this business.
Well, the Hiranandani Group is of course extending and diversifying to become well beyond just a developer. For example, you're building your first data center building on the outskirts of Mumbai. So what other markets should developers in your position be eyeing and entering?
Now, our focus as developer is the way that we have been able to build and be in the top 3 developers of the country is essentially because we are very good at building infrastructure. We don't build single buildings. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about building an ecosystem and building a community. When you talk about township and buildings within it, and then amenities and the infrastructure around it for people to really feel like Powai is a walk to work kind of a concept that Hiranandani is very famous for.
Sure.
And if you really look at the infrastructure that we built around the township, we are pretty ahead of times. So I think a progression into infrastructure and industrial logistics is a very natural one, given our strength and capabilities. And I think as an asset class, we are also pretty gung-ho and very positive about this asset class for the next 10 years to come, given all the development that's taking place in the Indian context.
Global investors are uncovering new business opportunities in the Indian real estate market. To understand the nuances of how cross-border real estate transactions are best handled in today's market climate, we met with Shashank Jain and Bhairav Dalal of PwC India's real estate practice.
Given your long-standing experience in the real estate practice at PwC, walk us through some of the nuances of cross-border transactions in this space.
That's an interesting question, and we've seen a lot of transactions happening, a lot of capital inflow coming in from cross-border and foreign investors. I think there are a couple of things. One, when you look at India, within India, a real estate market is very regional, right? We really don't have pan-India players.
Sure.
And for the foreign investors to come in, not only do they have to understand India, but they have to understand regions, they have to understand states, they have to understand different asset classes, because a residential segment behaves very differently from commercial office
Absolutely.
to a retail, etc. So it adds multi-layer of complexities for the foreign investors. And as a result, what we've seen, investors who are long-term, who want to stay invested in India or have done well, the way they've gone about doing it, rather than doing any remote cross-border transactions sitting somewhere overseas, they've tend to open shops here, they've tend to got teams here so that they can understand the lay of the land. That's really worked well in case of cross-border transactions. I think for the Indian developers, what has worked well is that has really taught them a greater level of professionalism. You know, they've taught them how to think big, how to think differently, how to do business in a transparent way with high level of governance. So to that extent, I think it's been a win-win for both sides of the transactions, I would say.
Well, let's talk about REITs in particular, real estate investment trusts, which are essentially designed to invite more participation in the market, to invite more liquidity in the market, to essentially give funding a boost. Why haven't more individuals flocked towards this particular investment vehicle?
Globally, REIT has been a slow product to evolve. It takes time for the market to understand the complexity of the product. If you see Singapore, which is where we always get compared with, they took 3 years for the first REIT listing to happen. That was after a lot of incentives from the government. Our REIT regulations were released in 2013. By the time they got all the incentives and it was a viable product, it was 2016-17. After that, people have started working on the REITs. One already listed, received a superb response globally. A lot of interest has now arisen even amongst the domestic investors. With the interest rates going down, REIT is going to be a very nice investment product to have in your portfolio. So I would expect a lot of investors to also now start investing in REITs. We are likely to see a couple of more REITs going forward in the next 12 to 18 months. It's only a matter of time where India on a 10-year timeline will have a very, very strong REIT market.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time and for sharing those insights.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back to a special series of GRI Club presents India, an emerging global real estate investment destination. Technology and real estate are becoming increasingly intertwined. To do a deeper dive on how security management solutions for premier properties are evolving, we approached the co-founder of MyGate, Abhishek Kumar.
Now, MyGate is largely credited with digitizing apartment security, in that you provide security management solutions for gated premises, for gated communities. What led you to believe there was even a market need for such a service?
When the couple of us as co-founders now, we are friends, and we are wondering what next in our corporate jobs. And one thing that we saw as a macroeconomic trend is us living in gated communities. What we realized is one gated community or gated premise trend in India with urbanization is going to grow continuously. Second, the phenomena of what we call commerce coming inside community. And we are all part of it, right? Everybody is more than happy to click the button in their smartphone and get everything right from their household items to their food delivered to their doorstep. So we saw that the exodus or inflow of external footfall coming inside the community is going through the roof, and the friction point at the gate, because they are designed to keep people out, not let them in, and it caused immense friction point at the gates. And third, if you look at residential community or any gated premise, there's huge dependency on security guards, and nothing much has changed in the last few decades, where it is still dependency on human register, maybe a torch, and we thought there's a real opportunity to build a technology solution to remove this friction at the gate, and this could be a large opportunity across India.
Well, what sort of inroads have you made in the market? You know, talking about not just residential complexes, for example, but the gated premises, of course, includes schools, offices, factories, warehouses, and the list goes on.
Absolutely. So we do have in our pipeline to look at all kind of gated premises, but it is important to be focused and solve for one vertical first. And we realized after studying the space that residential is the most underserved market, and that's where some of the real pain points are, because that's also the place you live, and that's the consumption hotspot for people coming in. And security is substandard in some ways and forms. It doesn't meet the expectation of the resident. Having looked at that, we first build a solution for gated premise residential. Now we have a product market fit, and we are expanding at a rapid rate across 11 cities in India. In coming months, we will be looking at launching our commercial product for offices and tech parks.
Sir, thank you so much, and we wish you all the best for the future.
All right, thank you.
With sustainable development gaining momentum, Parish Kapse and Aditya Yamsanvar of Team 1 Architects shared their insights on how smart building strategies and sustainable development are impacting investor appetite.
So very curious to understand, how do you incorporate smart building strategies into architectural design?
Smart buildings are generally, we are looking at it from a more of a sustainability and the technology point of view. What has happened lately is a lot of greener ideas have generally been needed to be incorporated in buildings with the help of a lot of newer ideas in terms of indoor air quality, the water saving, the power saving, and this is with the help of smarter facades, newer technologies to kind of understand how much is the power consumption, and whatever parameters which we have developed has generally helped us to kind of become more net zero in the entire parlance of architecture.
And to build on that, how do you believe that sustainable development impacts investor appetite?
Absolutely easy. There's enough technology out here that can save the environment to a lot of extent, and more importantly, it's the power consumption which becomes the first level of sustainability. So you have all the solutions right from building management system, which makes the whole building intelligent. Then you have something called IoT, which actually gives a lot of information and data analytics back, which makes the BMS itself much more smarter and hence the building more smarter.
Sure.
IoT has taken a leap and is now, so the whole of BMS was relating to sustainability for the company or for the building. IoT goes actually to an individual. So it's the individual who gets profited and benefited, and hence the BMS and the sustainability takes a new leap. Beyond that, it's the kind of indoor quality that it helps you maintain, the kind of power consumption it saves you. The actual user is able to get the benefit of the LEED and the wellness, which hence transpires into a better sustainability. So it's only technology that is helping you do it. There's nothing else that can help you.
And do you believe that these sustainable building models are impacting investor appetite?
Absolutely, because what happens is the moment you have taken care of these parameters, which is human centric, the investor also is happier that he is getting connected to the last grassroots level. He is also happy that the entire sales aspect, the sales angle, because of this virtue is going to help him to make sure that it's a clean shot sellout. So it obviously is going to help for the entire leasing or the sellout of such kind of sustainable spaces earlier than a non-sustainable building.
Most of these sustainable buildings actually have become future-proof.
Yeah.
So you're weaving in technology which is you can expect to be redundant after 5 and 10 years.
Sure.
That helps the client and his tenant sustain and be sticky on that particular project or specific. So as an investor, the bet that he's putting on the project is for a far more lifer, and that is making the investor go for a grade A smarter buildings rather than a grade A without smart buildings. So I think they will stick around with smarter technology buildings, no doubt.
So thank you so much for your time and
Thank
for
you.
sharing your thoughts with us.
Co-living has been gaining widespread traction across India and has disrupted the traditional approach to buying a home. To understand the demand for such business models, we spoke to the CEO and CFO of CoWorks, Abhishek Goenka.
Abhishek, between student housing, senior living, multi-family dwellings, co-working in India has now extended to include co-living. Which such models do you expect to generate the most demand going forward?
I think it's not about one versus the other. I think it's about the larger concept that we should be thinking about right now. So
Sure.
whether it is co-working or it is co-living or it is student housing, if you look at the core of it, it is about the shared economy. It is about the younger millennial generation wanting to focus on an experience and not just fulfill a basic amenity or a need. And more importantly, look at that experience being tech enabled. In addition to all of this, there's a huge element of community building. So again, whether it is student housing or co-living or co-working, all of it is about working together, working in a community, working and interacting with people beyond just your immediate circle of influence.
Absolutely.
So to me, all of these will coexist. As you pointed out right at the beginning, one will feed off the other. Although to some extent, each can independently exist. and it's not really necessary that a co-living and co-working should be together or next to each other. I mean, yes, in an ideal world, one must live, work, and play in a certain circumference, but equally each of them can coexist in an absolutely independent manner.
Well, to what extent is technology shaping consumer expectations, and how difficult is it for players in this space to keep pace?
I think it's all about technology. Like I said earlier, it's about the experience and a technology-enabled experience. We live in a smartphone generation where everything that we do pretty much of our lives, whether it's the food we order, whether it's the entertainment, whether it's the searches, the sort of social media, all of that is through a tech-enabled mechanism. And that's absolutely true when one works and lives, or whether it's a student housing as well. And again, I think we need to dimension this in the right context. Some of it is just the efficiency which technology brings. Some of it is very important to the new generation, like sustainability. How sustainable is the place? What's the quality of air I'm breathing? All of this has to be driven by technology. And I think people are today also very sensitive in terms of how I can contribute to reduction in just my utilization of the various resources, which is also contributed by technology. We have sensors, we have our cameras which determine where people are congregating, where there are more people than necessary, and based on that, designs are being redone. All of this applies across the different formats that we talked about. Now, in terms of how difficult it is to keep up, I think it's as difficult as it is for any other sector, because there's so many developments literally on a day in and day out basis. The good news, however, is that all companies in this sector, including co-works, have large teams in-house which are working towards building technologies that influence these experiences. So I think this sector, in my view, will remain at the forefront, and a lot of the technological innovation coming out of this will actually have its utilization and applications even beyond these three sectors, because at the end of the day, it's touching the experience that people are having.
So thank you so much for your time, and we wish you continued success.
Thank you.
That brings this special series of GRI Club Presents India, an emerging global real estate investment destination, to a close. But as our conversations with industry luminaries indicated, global optimism with respect to the Indian real estate market and its outlook continues.